Hi everyone, this is Varun Gumidi, and you're listening to the Stars and Startups podcast. Did you enjoy the blockbuster episode with Nitin Kamath of Zerodha on episode 36? Do write into me and tell me all about it. On this episode, I'm changing it up a little as I catch up with Arjun Majumdar and Sandhya Chandrashekharayya, the founders of IndiaHikes, India's premier hiking company that started way back in 2008, with the hopes of making hiking accessible to more Indians so that they can enjoy the bounty that India has in abundance, right from the Western Ghats to the mighty Himalayas. Yes, this is not much of a tech conversation, but a story that I really wanted to share with you. Hope you enjoy. Do take a moment to subscribe to the podcast wherever you listen to it and subscribe to our newsletter on stars.substack.com. Okay, let's say hi to Arjun and Sandhya. Today we're going to talk a little bit about hiking. I know a lot of you guys, probably cooped up at home, wanting to step out into the open and smell fresh air on the mountains. Hopefully, we get there really, really soon. But I wanted to share a story, about how the Indian outdoor scene has kind of taken off in the last decade or so. Not that it didn't exist prior, but now I think a lot more young people from across the country want to go out, experience, as the youngsters call these days, YOLO. So, you live only once. So you go and check out all these amazing locations. So one of the companies that's making this possible is IndiaHikes. Let's welcome Sandhya and Arjun to the show. Hi, Sandhya. Hi, Arjun.
Hi.
Arjun and Sandhya, you guys started IndiaHikes in 2008, and this was, I would say, just around the financial crisis in the United States, and then there was a ripple effect around the world. Did this have anything to do with the founding of IndiaHikes? You really want to go to the mountains and be like, you know what, let's just do this for the next couple of years before things sort out. I mean, you're from the Silicon Valley of India, so I was trying to see if there's any, correlation to the event.
No, absolutely not, Varun. There was no correlation at all. We see India Hikes, though we started in 2008, the thought about India Hikes was going on for 3 years. It's almost 6-7 years before that. So when we are trekking, we're looking at the problems that are there in the trekking world. We're always, mulling amongst ourselves, talking in our tents, sitting down, under a big waterfall, maybe, and thinking, why is this problem in this trekking world? Why is that problem in this trekking world? So eventually, one day we just started, because we were always anyway, even before starting India, we were solving these problems in our own way. By putting out information about this, or putting out information about some trails or something. So it was a very organic start. It had nothing to do with the 2008 Wall Street crash. And
which hike or trek was that? Which was like, okay, you know what? Let's do this as a a business. This is our life now.
It was the Rupkund trail that is in Uttarakhand.
I think the Rupkund trek was a really, really grand one, which went to a pretty good height of 15,750 feet. And these kinds of treks were really not accessible, or people didn't even know that normal people, regular people, could go to these places, or they exist in our country. So I think when people saw that they could actually go and trek here, that's when their imaginations opened up and people wanted to be a part of something like this.
What was that insight though? Because I remember, I did my first, I did 2 hikes back to back in 2003, and I had gone to the Himalayas. I did Sar Pass and Harkidun. That was, somebody suggested you do this, and I think it fit in my calendar because I had like a summer vacation in college. So I was like, yeah, let's do this. And, from somebody from the South, and I'm from Chennai, like I mentioned, I didn't know many people who understood, what it takes to go to the Himalayas and do this, right? So everything was a journey itself. There was this whole aspect of, okay, you could read some aspects of some brochures. So I'd used this company called Youth Hostel Association of India, YHAI. I think they offered ton of treks, and they had a lot of people on those treks. So it was also a nice experience where people from across the country came together, on these camps. So you got to interact with different cultures, so to speak, and that was a great melting pot for me. Um, what is the insight then to say, okay, you know, we want to do this? Maybe they're the companies, these are government agencies, right? YHI is run by a government body. So, what was it that really pushed you to say, okay, we want to do this? And was Rupkund the YHI trek?
So Rupkund was not really a YHI trek. In fact, only the hardcore trekkers would know about Rupkund, or about 30-40 people in the whole year in our country would do a trek like Rupkund. And Arjun Arjun trekked to Rupkund with his own small team, private team. And he came back and he wrote a blog that detailed out Rupkund beautifully. It actually detailed out the entire trek route, gave all details, described the parts of the trek absolutely how they were, and it sparked imagination amongst anybody who read this blog. And I think the blog became an instant hit, and and looking at the reaction to the blog, I think the thought that was fermenting in his head that okay, this would be the trek to start with, because it has kind of sparked imagination in people's minds, and we could see that happening.
Actually, I want to show a little backstory here. See, at that time, there was only one organization which probably did treks, which was Youth Hostel, which you have been a participant of. And they would do only these two trails, which is the Chandrashekharayya Pass, or the Harkidun, or the Sar Pass. Now, in this situation, but if you had looked at the reality of trekking in a country, trekking was something which was not done by many people. It was not accessible by many people. People didn't know how to trek, where to trek, and what kind of treks to do. I mean, if the whole definition of treks are going to be one or two treks, then that is not trekking. Trekking has a whole gamut from the Himalayas to the sea to the beaches. So that's how now when we have been trekking since our childhood, we have been trekking, doing all kinds of treks. So in our experience, there was our country was just not trekking, and we wanted our country to start trekking, and that's the genesis of IndiaHikes. That India was just not trekking. Youth hostels trek was not the definition of trekking. It was just two trails, three trails that.
So when that was the case, did you see a lot of ecological damage as well? If you're saying, just two or three routes, and there are hundreds of people going through that route on an everyday basis, was that something that because it's not suggested, right? Because you need to let nature also recover after there's a lot of intrusion in that space. Was that happening on some of these routes?
At that time, not many people were worried about the environment. Very frankly speaking, neither youth hostels. At the back of the mind, something was there that yes, you need to be careful, but nobody really bothered, because at the end of the day, even with those 50, 100 people going every day, the matter was over in a month or a month and a half. You had the whole year to recover. And nature recovers very quickly. So that was never a problem. The genesis of IndiaHikes is not in these things. The genesis was there was a lot of problems surrounding trekking, that people didn't know where to trek and how to trek. So and they wouldn't trek because there was such a lack of information about trekking. So that's where IndiaHikes came about. That unless there is information about trekking, and not only information, but there is this information which will help you and guide you on how to go about doing any trek, and you can do it on your own. See, we are talking about not a group trekking, but we're talking about anybody must be able to trek on his or her own. Just like how we do in Western countries or something, you just take a backpack and you go on, do a trek. So that was the genesis, that without information you cannot trek. And there was n number of treks that you could do in our country, but nobody had an idea. The ecological problem came much later.
Okay. I think now you've been spending a little bit more time on that, which I'll come to a little later when we can talk about ecology and what India Hikes is doing in that kind of sphere. Um, so how did people then find out about India Hikes? Because I would imagine if information is not available, now you need to make it accessible, educational and interesting, right?
Yes.
Was that a process that you followed? How did you go about,
It was a very
reaching out to new
conscious
audience?
process. There was a very conscious process that we followed at the very first, the same. See, one is that blog which I was talking about. That blog really helped in people finding us. But that is a small percentage of it. Another thing that we did was we knew that we are going to be trekking on a trail like Rupkund. So the domain name of Rupkund was there with us, rupkund.com. So all searches of rupkund.com would come to us. Now this also gave us a lot of, plus our past credibility and our name in the trekking world also helped, but that was a very small percentage. So, and we did a lot of what you would call, we had a database of trek people who we knew trek, because they have been getting in touch with me. We knew a lot of people. This thing. So a lot of mailing campaigns were also going. So the domain name, the you would say the blog, and our campaigns, email campaign. These were the three primary sources of getting the initial setup.
Since we,
Post that, I think our rich content actually helped quite a bit, because people had never seen information on trekking the way it was presented on our roopkund.com domain, perhaps. Also, once we ran those initial 3 batches, the 60 people who went with us, they became hardcore fans of India Hikes, and they really believed in the idea of India Hikes. And they went all out to actually tell other people that, hey, you should do something like this. This is something that we've never experienced before, and it's something new in our country. And they were right behind India Hikes after their experience at India Hikes.
What people will identify with is that how content matters in conversions. So the thing is that credible content plays such a huge role that you will not even imagine the difference between credible and non-credible content. Our content was so credible, so exhaustive. See, most people would write about treks at that time, 200 words, 300 words. Here is the trek, you can go, this is the price, this is not price, tax and all this. Our content was 6,000 words. I mean, more than that. It doesn't link, match. We wrote about every turn of the trek, every bend of the trek, every point where you can get water to anything. And we wrote it in such a way that you could do the trek on your own. You didn't need to come with India Hikes. That way the content was present. We didn't talk about India Hikes. We talked about the trek. That was a fundamental shift. We didn't talk about India Hikes at all. We talked about the trek and we celebrated the trek. And that's how the content just changed the whole trekking scene. And it's still doing in our country.
I'm an extreme awe of the content that you guys churn out, right? And reality is, there's something about the mountains and nature that's so shareable also. And I think given the proliferation of social media since that time, I guess 2012, 2013, where Facebook would be driven by photos. Instagram is now only photographs, right? Your Now when you look at India Hikes, if I went on a camp, then I'm only looking for that Instagrammable photograph, right?
Moment.
That moment, like sunrise, sunsets. You're always trying to like position yourself to, okay, look at this beautiful stone or rock that has shown up, whatever. You'll just find something that you want to, kind of take back home as a memory, right? But from a content standpoint, was there anything you did deliberately? Now I know that 6,000 words, and you're trying to focus on the fact that this is a great trek to be on, the routes that you're going to cross, whatnot. But what was it that people were latching on to, and you said, okay, you know what, let's focus on just these aspects, which will give so much more flavor and color to the content that we put out.
See, Varun, I'll come back to the point which I made earlier. Credibility of the content matters over anything. How you write it, who writes it, and in what voice are you writing it. So our content was absolutely the most credible content, and it still is. In India, if anybody is looking for credible content, they still go to the IndiaHikes website. You know that. So it's the credibility of the content, the exhaustiveness, because we covered every tiny details. When people came and looked at on a website, they understood that we are talking with experts. We are not talking with somebody who wants to sell a trend. And that makes a very big difference. And we were the experts. We knew the place in and out because we lived there. We knew the people. We were there for months. Other organizations had they were nowhere even close to what we were doing there. Because the people there, the knowledge of the land, the knowledge of the trek was so exhaustive with us, and it still is, that nobody can actually talk about a trek the way we can.
Talking about the do-it-yourself aspect, I've seen that it takes up a big section of the IndiaHikes website today. Can you give some idea on what kind of utilization it has, and do people share their experiences post the DIY treks that and how do you maintain that?
One of our values or one of the philosophies that we have in India is that people must be able to do treks on their own. Yes, that the number of people who actually access a DIY information is more than who actually access our, you would call our treks that we run.
Also have a team working on the DIY treks who are actually looking for people who have done these treks. They get in touch with them, they talk to them, and they try to get that information, because those who have done the treks themselves may not be able to document it to the detail that we want it to be. So with this prompting and to and fro with them, we are able to extract the details that anybody else would need to go and do the trek on their own.
One thing I've noticed is with the IndiaHikes team, a lot of them are trekkers who have done the trip, end up becoming employees and becoming part of the team. I think that's a real filtration process, right? You're like, you know what, this person has their heart in the right place and they really want to be part of this journey. Is that ever a checkbox whenever you're hiring?
Yes, definitely. That's one of the basic things we will be looking for. That if you have not trekked before, you wouldn't understand this world at all. So, and there are many people whom we deliberately send them on a trek. Go do a trek first. But 90% of the people would be trekkers, and most of them would have trekked with us soon.
When somebody comes to trek with us, we kind of tell them about our philosophy, why we are doing IndiaHikes and what we are doing. So even as a trekker, people get to know all these things. And the same thing gets reiterated on the slope when they go see us in action. So this whole thing gets sealed then, and then they come back from the trek, and some of them say that, okay, I would like to be a part of this trek.
Before we started the conversation, we talked a lot about, kind of the regions where some of these trekkers come from. Are you seeing, in my mind, everybody in Bangalore hikes and treks, right? They're always there, on a weekend, doing something or the other. Is this the right stereotype to form, or there are others who have a similar, blood type?
I would say the trekking culture in Bangalore, I think, originated from this college and IT working crowd, because that is how it was 15 years ago or 20 years ago, perhaps. So people would go to the Western Ghats and trek. And at that point of time, there was no Himalayan option, but now that has actually moved on. So people are a lot more open to trekking in the weekends nearby, and then once a year, twice a year with the Himalayas.
Actually, most of our trekking in our country, if you look at it, I can break it down and give it to you. The largest would be the Pune-Mumbai sector. And I will combine Pune-Mumbai because they're very close to each other. So Pune-Mumbai is the largest in our country, followed by Bangalore. Then you would have Delhi, Chennai, and then Hyderabad. So these would be the order of the metro cities which are, which come for trekking. Then the rest of the metros, then rest of India.
So does this reflect in the number of people who come regularly on some of these hikes?
It does. This profile over the last 10 years hasn't changed much. The only change that we are seeing is the rest of India are now catching up with the this thing. Earlier, we wouldn't see rest of India at all. Now we are seeing a lot of rest of
Do you contribute that to the fact that the content now is reaching a lot more people with technology?
India. That is one aspect, but more than see, I'll tell you what, that is one aspect of it. Another thing is that the economy has touched the rest of our country a lot deeper than 10 years ago. So now that has also helped, but the principal motivator or the principal reason would be what you have said, that to the technology which has now reached the rest of our country. There's really not much difference between Kanpur and Delhi now.
See, technology does play a big role because we need to present information in a way it is easily consumable. People need to be able to understand and appreciate whatever we are presenting. Because long ago, 10 years ago, we started in the form of those 6,000 word articles. But as time has passed by, we need to explore other forms of technology and to present information and which people can consume much easier. So in that way, it has changed, and it still continues to play a role because the way people consume information has changed. So we have also evolved from largely being text and photo based to now being video based, uh, and giving other forms of information like maybe giving GPS tracks and stuff like that for people to understand the trail, and when they go on the trail they feel a lot more empowered. So we are also seeing how we can change ourselves to adapt to this evolving technology. And technology also plays a role in running our whole operation because we run a remote operation across the country, across the Himalayas of the country. And as the operation becomes bigger and bigger, without technology, we see things going out of control quite a bit. So that is where we are. That's another space where we are bringing in technology quite a bit, so that we have everything running smoothly.
Sandhya, I'm going to, kind of use as a launch pad to ask you this question. We said that you have a remote team and we're using technology and so on. In
Yeah.
today's world, and we're talking about us being in lockdown, and we're all working in our own little spaces. What have been some of the learnings running a real remote team? I mean, you guys have people all across the country in the remotest parts. Um, what are some of those things, like maybe tools, processes, and how do you get people oriented to the fact that there's not going to be any oversight and they're responsible? How do you build that? I'd love to get yours and Arjun's thought on this.
Okay, so we especially work with people in the mountains, and they are used to running treks on their own, and they do a pretty good job. They maintain their accounts in small notebooks, and then they just do everything word of mouth. Just a day before the trek, everything gets organized and gets done. So they're used to doing things very informally. So, but as you scale up, when you're running more and more batches and more variables come in, we started to realize that this kind of informal way of going about things, word of mouth way of going about things, doesn't really work very well. A lot of things go missing here and there. There are slip ups that happen. And so, changing this whole process from a very informal person to person based thing to a more process driven thing was quite a bit of challenge for us because we are dealing with a group of 30-40 people in the mountains whose basic habits and mindset we have to change. We have one or two people who are slope managers or who trek leaders who come who are like taking this technology from our office over here to the mountains, and then finally the technology has to be used by the mountain staff, not really city staff. If we are at our store in the mountains, then we have introduced a system of tracking each and every equipment of ours using RFIDs. So it's not enough if we have an RFID scanner and a tag, but somebody has to actually be doing the scanning thing every time there is an exit and getting into the store. So impressing upon these people that showing them the benefits of technology I think that has been a challenge, and we are still in the process of overcoming this. But once they see it working, they see the results of how everything is organized, you can go back to it, things using this technology. They are also pretty open to it. And any difficulties that come in, we must be ready to change. So they've used several types of technology and said, okay, this is too difficult, let's change this. So many such iterations, and over 2-3 years, things get stabilized.
I think one of the biggest challenges of technology that we had was deployment of technology. Look, you can have the greatest of technology, but if there isn't any mobile signals, even if there isn't any network, you're talking about a system where you have to now depend on syncing it when there is signal or when you come to signal, which could be 50, 60 kilometers away or something like that. So these are the challenges of technology. Even today, when I'm speaking to you, 2020, these are still the challenges because we're talking about the remotest corners of our country where there aren't even mobile signals. And we are talking about the highest end of apps and development that we're doing at our back end of our offices, and that has to be deployed there. So they have to be very thin apps. They have to load very quickly. They have to be able to be easy to understand, very pictorial in nature, so that it can be used by anybody. Not only pictorial because they don't understand, because we're working in a very cold setting or a remote setting where you may be wearing gloves and you need to be able to press a few buttons because that has to be pressed by the gloved finger and not a naked finger. So, we have to think of all these aspects of usability when we are deploying technology.
At any given time, how many trekkers would be there on a trip?
On any regular week, this would be the pre-COVID times. On an average, we would be running about 15 to 20 teams on any weekend. Treks usually start between Friday and Monday. Week, I would say, not weekend. They would be concentrated around the weekend. So we would have about 15 to 20 groups starting and running over that week. So treks are usually 6 to 8 days long. So about 15 into 50, about 600, 700 people every week.
And this is all year round, right? Like I know there are only maybe a couple of windows where there's probably a break for the team, but otherwise you're constantly on the ball.
Yeah. Treks, initially 10 years ago, we used to have treks only during summer and autumn. They were the only two seasons. People thought that they could trek in the Himalayas, but slowly we introduced new treks that could be done during different times of the year. Treks that were kind of possible even in the peak winter months. They would become winter treks. When the really high altitude ones would be shut, we opened the treks that were possible to do in December, in January. We shifted regions also. We went to Kashmir and Himachal, where we could trek in the peak monsoon months when Uttarakhand and Sikkim were closed. So over the last 10 years, we've made it a year-round affair that any time you can go and find a trek to do.
That's amazing, right?
Said, there are peak seasons, but more or less our treks run 365 days a year.
So then even that aspect of seasonality gets handled because some part of the country, and India is large enough, you're always going to be able to find something to do, at any given time. That basically means 52 weeks, 700 people. You're probably doing 30,000 people a year that go through roundabout.
20,000 plus.
Yeah, it would be 20, not 30. So there would be months where it doesn't reach 15 perhaps every week. But yeah.
That also means a lot of cooperation with entities, government entities, because a lot of these spaces are under the control, and you need permission for a lot of these spaces. Do you have a team that just works with the local bodies and authorities, because it's a source of revenue for them, but also, do they try to take advantage of you? What is the relationship? I mean, this is India we're talking about, so.
I think initially it was not that smooth, but now it is a lot smoother. We do run into issues, not really at the local level, but more at a decision taken at maybe a district level or the state level, where some states say, you cannot trek over there anymore. There is a problem here, or there is some issues that we are facing on those issues, but local level we don't face much of the problem. Sometimes we do come across, but our local level managers tend to take care of those issues. They can, and they know them personally well, all the, the forest department or the panchayat members or whatever it is, so they know them well. Yes, the local problems are there across the country. It's our managers who are at the local level who tend to take them. If they are unable to deal with it, then the senior managers get into this. Sometimes we have to get into the scene also. Yes, so local troubles, it's not that we are trouble-free in our country yet, but our country is slowly moving towards that phase where, it is getting better and easier to run.
And
But
trekking
like,
was largely without too many regulations in our country when we started out. So there weren't too many rules and restrictions that were put in place, or registrations that had to be done, or permissions that had to be taken. All these have grown with growth in trekking. And many a times we ourselves have given recommendations to the government bodies on what needs to be done, what would be the right thing to do for the environment, for the groups, for the locals in terms of training and stuff like that. So we do work closely with the heads of the forest departments in Uttarakhand, in Himachal, sometimes in Kashmir. So we have also kind of developed our relationship there. It starts right from our office all the way till the slope manager or somebody like that.
But most of the local problems, Varun, don't come from the government. The problem comes with the local folks with vested interest. It would be a local, gang of people who would want their people to be given more income, or they would want a higher share of this thing. For example, two taxi bodies may say, "No, why aren't you taking our vehicles instead of why are you taking those people's vehicles?" So they will create a local trouble. So it's troubles generally come from local folks with vested interest, but otherwise governments really don't give us much of the problem.
One of the things that I found when, like I mentioned, I had been on a couple of IndiaHikes treks, and one of the things that it really came across was also how concerned you are with maintaining the kind of relationship with the locals and the environment. What have been some of the projects that you've taken up? Uh, I mean, let me just start by saying, I read about last year, I think 2019 April, uh, how Mount Everest has thousands of kilos of waste that was lying around. Right? Of course, it's a different terrain. There's a lot of different aspects to why there's 1,000 kilos of garbage sitting on Mount Everest, and I'm sure that's not the case for other locations as well. But I would imagine, because of uh, more people going to these locations, and what I saw on some of those treks was, we were also bringing plastic, items with us, either to just cover our clothes, maybe take some snacks. I always want my bar of Snickers, whatever it could be, right? There's always something that's going from a city where we have all the waste disposal mechanisms, etc., into some of these locations where none of it exists because they live off of the environment, of their surroundings. Is that something of concern?
So when we started in 2009, there were very few people trekking in these mountains. As I told before, about 60 people in the whole of Rupkund trek in the whole of the year. So there was hardly any noticeable garbage or waste that was being left behind. But a couple of years down the lane, with IndiaHikes growing and with other organizations also mushrooming and following the IndiaHikes style of trekking, they started getting more and more people to the mountains. More and more people started going to the mountains on their own also. It was not just the organization. So more and more people going to the mountains, and as you said, these plastic waste also went up. It's not about people littering. Trekkers are generally conscious. They don't leave behind their own waste like Snickers and stuff like that. But cooking also in the mountains generates a lot of waste, and that can be quite a handful to bring down. The people are a little hesitant to employ mules to specifically carry down waste. I don't know why we have this mindset, but people hesitate to get back waste when they think it can be buried or burnt right there. Many places it is mules don't go; porters have to lift, load, and go. And again, we have the same problem in very difficult areas to go. So, looking at all this, we thought that if we are growing, we need to set an example, and we need to set a standard where we leave the mountains better than how we found them, and it is not enough to just bring back our own waste, and we need to do something more, and we need to clear up our trails also. And we wanted to involve our trekkers because India Hikes was always a community for us, and our trekkers were a very integral part of our community. So this whole habit of having an eco bag with you always when you trek, and you pick up any litter that you find on the trail. We have specialized campsite cleaning activities when we leave a campsite. So all this started way back in 2013-14, when we saw that litter in the mountain was beginning to surface, and this team of 20 people was like a vacuum cleaner going on the mountains, and we wanted to harness this energy that we had, and that's how our entire Green Trails program started. And 7 years down the line, it is not just limited to clearing waste from the mountains, but we have kind of tried to diversify Green Trails to do a lot more, like use less water, conserve water, use less mules on the trail itself, so that we can improve efficiency of having lesser footprint on the mountains itself, use lesser porters, improve our system so that all the additional load that goes on the mountain actually comes down. And that's why we do a lot of things, like we tell trekkers, okay, carry your own backpacks, don't offload it even if you can afford to offload it. Stay three in a tent, because you will actually reduce one less tent on the slope itself, thereby reducing your footprint on the trail. So it's a whole philosophy that we practice on the mountains, and we try to pass on to our trekkers for them to practice while trekking and off trekking also.
Green trails as a concept, what happens is that we are now trying to change the way people look at the environment in the mountain. Where there is no sensitivity, we are bringing in sensitivity. And not only with us, but even the local people. See, what happens is that when you come from a background where you're not, when survival is more important than the environment, so you don't really consider that I bought a lace packet for my home, that what is going to happen to it. And I'm talking about the local pollution. With increase in economy, even the local population in that region have become more consumerist. So what has happened is now a lot more litter is there in the mountains. Even if two porters are going in the mountains, they're chewing gum and throwing wrappers. So this is a growing concern in our country. So as India Hikes, we have about 3 or 4 pronged approach. One is education. That is training and education at the grassroots level, that we educate our staff, and not only staff, but with the entire village, the panchayat, and all those people. We have a very close relationship that, including going to the schools of children, and, so that when they become future citizens, they know that I must not be doing this. So that's the ongoing program that we do all the time. Next is that, can we improve our processes in such a way that it becomes a habit, that you don't really bring in, so, reduction of the waste that goes into from a cooking to a loading to a packaging to a merchandise, to everything is improving the processes, this thing. And third is the external forward, where we start cleaning up the mountains. We clean up, bring down the waste, upcycle them, recycle them, send them to the landfills, which cannot be processed through these stages. So it's basically a 3-pronged approach: training and education, internal processes, and the external processes, external waste that is there. So yeah, it's a lot of work, but if you ask me in a very quick way, this is what.
What's next for India Hikes? You mentioned the 20,000 people that you take on a yearly basis can actually, grow to a lot larger. Is there a lot more that can be done? Are you seeing a lot more demand?
Yes, we are, because trekking is a very nascent sport still in our country. Very few people trek. No matter what you're seeing in newspapers and magazines, the reality is very few people trek if you compare with the global level. When you look at the rest of the world and you compare India, India is very, very still very low in trekking. So when we talk India is taking 20,000 people, I mean, in a global level, people will laugh at it. So it's not really a number. This is a lot more. Of course, that when you go to a certain trails, you'll notice a few trails in our country is overcrowded already. And so our job is to move, or our work is to move people away from crowded trails, open up new trails and say, look, there are other trails to do. And they are moving. Our country has evolved and it's evolving. The trekking maturity of our country is evolving. People don't mind getting on new trails. People don't mind experimenting with, new genres of trekking and all kinds of trails. But the growth of trekking as such, if you ask me, it is still very new in our country. So there's a lot of this thing. But as India Hikes, we're also exploring trails across the world, where we are trekking in Nepal, in other parts of the world. We're opening up trails in the rest of the world. We want to see our own countrymen trekking in the different zones of the world, and they have started doing it. We want other folks also to come and trek in our country. A lot of things are happening.
When you said you're opening up international routes, is that because I've heard another organization that does something, but their job is to basically say, okay, I want to cater to those from Maharashtra who are traveling to Indonesia, right? That market is very specific. They're saying, okay, these guys want, vegetarian food and they want to do X, Y, Z. Hence, we will open up this route. Is that the same thing, saying if Indians want to go elsewhere, we're opening these routes, or they're saying this is untouched territory, we have so much learning from navigating this terrain, we're now taking that expertise to another location?
Not really. So we have actually opened a separate division. It's not really called as India Hikes. It is called as World of Hikes. And the entire purpose of World of Hikes is to bring out unknown trekking trails, which are very beautiful and yet undiscovered by people, and open it out for the trekkers of the world. It is not really for Indians, but anybody and everybody must be able to come and join these. We want to very clearly stay away from the crowded and popular routes and very popular countries, because everybody knows it and we don't really need to go there and open new trekking trails. But our main intention is to bring out trails in destinations which people have never heard of. People don't even know that trekking can happen there, and explore these places.
Yeah, so it's initially our own trekkers who want to go along for these treks, and they can be from anywhere of the country, including abroad. In fact, we opened up a trail recently last year in Georgia, which is just below Russia. And we had a full group of trekkers going from our side, but they were our trekkers, but from across the world. Some were from London, some were from Germany, many from India. So they were from this thing, and they actually went ahead and did that. So, and of course, our vision is that people from across the world will come and do this trek. It's just not Indian, but it is also, obviously, because we are from India, we would love our Indians also to do that.
Georgia is supposed to have some amazing terrain. Funny story is that I had a ticket to Georgia about 3 years ago. I didn't realize I needed a visa because I have an American visa, and I thought, somewhere I read they're probably going to accept my American visa and let me into the country. And then I think it was a week before I realized that I actually needed a visa and I need to get it done separately. And I changed it to another destination, which was Indonesia. I canceled that ticket and I bought the Indonesian ticket. And I did two volcano hikes on that trip. And it's probably the most stunning experience, right? It is very similar to that final day of the Himalayan hike where you do the summit. You wake up at 3 a.m. and you do the hike. You want to be there at sunrise so that you get the view and the ice is not melting. It was something similar. You go up to the crater and you see what's happening. You need to leave really, really early because otherwise it becomes extremely hot by the time you summit. So they want to take you earlier, and those are like amazing. So are you guys opening up? No, I mean I guess those are a lot more commercial. So you're going to stay away from countries like Indonesia, and I'm guessing you're probably going to look at other locations, maybe Cambodia. I think Georgia is a great. I think Burma is phenomenal. I think there are a lot of opportunities there.
A lot of countries in this world has a lot of opportunities. We are not really selecting ourselves by countries, but we are selecting by which are great trails, which are not so commercial, which have not too many people going, but they are absolutely astounding in beauty. That is what would be a first selection criteria. It can be even in US, it can be even in the middle of Europe, but that would be a first criteria of choosing. And they must be multi-day treks, because not too many multi-day treks are there in the world.
See, one more thing is that our treks in our country, especially in the Himalayas, are extremely beautiful, and they're well worth and more the time and energy people spend to trek there. So when we go out to another country, especially when Indians are going out, we are very conscious that these trails match up, at least in some way, to the Himalayan treks that we do. So anything less than that, people shouldn't feel that, okay, I could have done a trek in the Himalayas instead of coming here.
Yeah, that's a great benchmark to have, right? Ultimately, it said, okay, we need to be better than what we already have for it to be
Yeah.
worthwhile. Um,
Yeah.
Speaking about worthwhile, I'd love to end our amazing chat today with what is your favorite trek? Which is a trek that you would gift someone?
Why are you doing this torture on us?
I know it's very hard to choose from your babies.
Yeah. See, for example, the Buran Ghati trek, I would rate that very high. And it's also a trek which I would love to give to people. There are n number of treks in a country, okay, but Buran Ghati is one trek which kind of, I cannot gift any trek which people I'll find it difficult to do. There are a lot of treks which are that way, where they're extremely beautiful, but I don't think I will encourage people to go there. But Buran Ghati is a trek where I would say, Varun, I really like talking with you on this show. And if there's one trek you must do, then you must do the Buran Ghati trek. So that would be my suggestion for you.
When does it typically happen? Is it a winter trek? Is it a?
It's a summer and autumn trek. So from the middle of May to the end of June, and then from middle of September to the middle of October, these would be the great times.
Okay, I'll leave the trek details from IndiaHikes in show notes. Sandhya?
Yes.
Since Buran Ghati is already taken, I would say Kashmir Great Lakes is one of my favorites. And I would recommend anybody who loves trekking to go on Kashmir Great Lakes once.
That's a 7-day one, right? That's extremely
That's
gorgeous.
a 7-day one. Yes, yes. It's perhaps one of the most beautiful places in our country, in the world. I would say both.
It's unfortunate what is happening in Kashmir right now. I hope, do you guys have any idea when you'll be able to open up that route again? Or
Kashmir actually is open for trekking this year. Last year we had to shut down because of the Article 360 and stuff. But right from January this year, people have been visiting the Kashmir Valley, and this year itself, people we know have been on the trek and come back in their own capacity. We have not started organizing anything as yet, but Kashmir is open for trekking, and they are looking forward for trekkers.
It's just that because of COVID, we are not doing it. But next year, if there is no COVID, then Kashmir will be absolutely possible to try.
Now that we are on the topic of COVID, what's the has it impacted any of the locals and any of these areas, or is it primarily of course economically it has probably impacted them, but are you seeing any other impact to any of these routes and people?
Yes, it has greatly impacted trekking, Varun. I mean, trekking has stopped in our country. Absolutely, full stop. There isn't any trek happening. So until COVID, kind of, we come to a situation where we can tackle COVID a lot more better, and the numbers of our infections come down. We will not see a revival of treks until that happens. So, if one industry has been very severely hit by COVID, it would be the travel industry. And if you ask me a little bit even more, then trekking definitely is on the last niche of travel. So it has been very badly hit by COVID. There are a lot of people who have been displaced. Now we are just waiting for this COVID situation to change, and the moment it does, I think we'll be back. We are seeing signs of recovery a little bit, where people, they're a little tired of COVID now. They want to venture out, but the fear is still very much there, very much there. So Nobody really wants to catch a COVID, with neither the local staff nor the trekkers.
This is to hoping that we're able to cross the speed bump, and the latent demand should potentially make up for all the trekking that was lost in the last few months. Hey guys, wishing you great success with World of Hikes and India Hikes. If any of our listeners and audience are looking at this and saying, want to be a part of this journey, are you guys hiring? What are you looking for?
Yes, we are always looking for people who have an interest in this world and they feel they can do something and they want to work along with us. We have a careers page. They can just go to our website and take a look at what interests them. We have lots of options. Even if what's not written on a careers page and they have something in mind, they can always drop us an email and we'll get back to them.
Sandhya, Arjun, this has been amazing. Thanks for your time.
Thank you, Varun. Thank you for inviting us. It was a pleasure.